What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Roman's Creative Academy. As always, I am your host, Jay.
And I'm Mike.
And today we're talking about how to structure monthly payments on a terms deal. This is a huge question for everyone because there are so many different types of creative deals and you might not even be familiar with some of them. So we're going to break it down and we're going to start off with the easiest one, which is seller financing, right? So
Yep.
Mike, do you want to take it away?
Just to give you guys a quick backstory, maybe not all of you understand what creative financing is and the different types of deals that you can do. So with seller financing, that is when a seller owns a home free and clear, and you are just making them payments on a monthly basis, and they're acting as the bank.
It's pretty straightforward, right? So you talk with the seller, you ask them to hold what's called the note, and you come up with the terms between you and them.
Yep.
So, for example, if Mike has a house that I want, and I come to Mike and I said, hey, are you willing to sell me your house? And he's like, yeah, I want, let's say, $150,000 cash, right? But I don't have $150,000 cash to give him, and I can't get approved for a loan. So I tell him, hey, are you willing to be the bank for me? And so he comes back and tells me, yeah, sure. So at that point, we're now figuring out how long is he willing to wait for his $150,000, if there's any interest, stuff like that, right? So it's pretty much straightforward type of transaction. Now, let's talk about subject to. If you haven't heard what subject to is, it is a type of creative financing. It's basically when you take over someone's mortgage on their behalf, right? So you're making their monthly payment to the bank. With these types of transactions, you can't really make up terms because the bank already did, right? So, with that being said, what if Mike wanted $150,000 and he had a mortgage on it?
And let's just say my mortgage was only $50,000 and I had $100,000 in equity. Well, Jay is not going to come and give me $100,000 as a down payment and then take over my payments up for the $50,000 loan, right? There obviously is a way to structure this, but what is that? That is called a wraparound mortgage or a hybrid deal. There's many different names in the industry for it. We call it a wraparound mortgage, right? That's the formal name. Basically, what we would do, right, and we're going to break some things down for you, but, right, what we would do is Jay would say, hey, Mike, well, I know that you have the loan on your home, and I know that you are asking for $150,000 in equity. What we can do is I can take over the payments on your behalf for the $50,000 loan that you have. I typically do buy with no money down, so then the remaining $100,000, right, we could come up with a way on how I can get you repaid. Now, some sellers are okay with just taking a balloon payment, right? And in a couple videos you've watched, right, we've talked about how, some sellers are willing to just let you take over the payments, and at the end of whatever time frame you agree upon, they get one big check, right?
That's called a balloon payment.
Some sellers, and again, if there's room in the deal for it too, which we're going to get into here momentarily, will also want a payment to them. So not only are you paying the bank a payment, you're also paying the seller a payment towards the money that you owe them, right? And when you do that, you have to keep in mind a few things so that you are still buying a good deal and making the seller happy, right? So in terms of the deal itself, right, when we're looking at things, right, Jay, like let's just say you're going to buy this house and you were going to rent it out, right? If my payment to the bank is $1,000 and you can rent it out for $1,500, that doesn't leave a ton of room for you to also make me a payment.
Correct. And then that's not even accounting for the reserves, if you have to put reserves aside on a monthly basis. So that's very tight right there within itself. And a lot of people don't realize that. So the spread has to be there. Now, let's say that his payment to the mortgage company was only $500, right? And I could rent it out for $1,200, $1,500. Now we're talking.
Now there's room for me to be paid, right? So what do we look for, and how do we figure out, not only on a straight seller financing deal, but on a wraparound mortgage deal? I'm going to start with a seller financing deal and how we come up with monthly payments to our sellers, and how most of the time we get a 0% interest loan with the seller on a seller financing deal. So first and foremost, the first thing I always ask a seller, or we both do, is John, if I'm paying the taxes and insurance on a monthly basis.
Note what he just said. You have to know the taxes and the insurance, because that also feeds into the monthly cost.
Correct. If I'm paying those out of my own pocket, what is the least you'd accept in a monthly payment on a monthly basis? Let them say their number. Always have a seller give their number first. You never give yours first, no matter what period or what point in that conversation you're at. If it's an egregious amount, you're going to walk them down a path to tell them why you can't do it and where you need to be. You're not just going to cut them at their knees and say, absolutely not, I need to be here. You need to explain it to them. That's where we advise and educate. We don't persuade, right? Now, what we do here is, let's just say that seller, his or her number is right on the money. Then we just keep moving. What did we just negotiate? By having the seller give us a number and John's like $500 a month and we're good, that's a 0% mortgage. He just wants $500 per month. It's just $500 a month towards the money that we owe him, right? Or her, whoever it may be. Now, let's just say that number is crazy. We're going to look at about 4 to 5 different things. First and foremost, you need to know your rental comps. You need to figure out what that house can rent for. When you're underwriting a deal, you always underwrite it as a long-term rental, not a short-term, not a mid-term, not a rent-to-own. You do it as a long-term rental because that is your safety net if all other exit strategies fail. So it needs to make sense as a long-term rental first. Then you're going to take into account taxes and insurance. You're going to figure out what the taxes are and get a general idea on what the insurance policy is. And then from there, you are also going to subtract out your reserves from the rental income. What are your reserves? Maintenance, CapEx, expenses, utility, or property management, all that stuff. Obviously, depending on your exit, things will change. With rent to own, we don't really have any reserves. But you still need to make sure, and we always do, that the properties that we buy and or negotiate make sense as a generic, organic, old school, long-term rental. Right? And then from there, you need to figure out how much spread and how much meat is left on the bones after subtracting all of that out monthly. So you break everything down monthly. Your goal is to shoot for a 30% plus cash-on-cash return. So now let's just say you subtracted all that out, and it says at the bottom, right? Because there's a calculator that we use, right? And we're going to get into that in a little bit if it's something that maybe you want to talk about and how you can actually go and get it from us, right? But regardless, we typically shoot for 30% minimum cash on cash.
And I want to say this, a lot of people think that because they get a terms deal, it's a great deal. That is not always the case, right? You still have to look at your numbers and, like Mike said, look at your cash on cash return.
Just because it says the word seller financing, owner financing, creative, it's not a deal. It has to make sense. You have to be able to make money. When you go into any store and you're looking for a deal, you're getting something that other people may not be able to get. You're getting something that's not typically offered. You're getting something that makes sense and where you actually made money or saved money, right? That's what the definition of a deal is. You need to create a deal for yourself and for your buyer if you're wholesaling it, but whatever, right? So when you're looking at your calculator and at the bottom of that calculator, after you subtract everything out, it says that you have $700 of profit on a monthly. That's obviously without taking into account any numerical number that you're going to give to the seller. So now you know that you have X amount of dollars to play with, And that means that you can now start plugging into your calculator to figure out what is your max monthly payment you can give to the seller. Obviously, there's old school ways to do it. There's a way, just like with a bank, right? They're going to take the payments and amortize it over 30 years, so on and so forth. Well, the cool part about seller financing is this is a private mortgage. This is a private note. You could make it whatever you want. We've done deals where we amortize it over 55 years. We've done deals where it's been amortized over 10. It doesn't matter. It just, the numbers need to work, right? So that's why I'd never advise going off an amortization schedule. I always advise coming up with a win-win situation between you and the seller.
And Mike, explain, because even me, I wasn't in the accounting world, or I'm not a mathematical person. What do you mean by amortization?
So amortization is just simple math. That means that you have $150,000 and you're amortizing it over 30 years. What do I mean by that? You are breaking that payment, you're breaking the $150,000 down in monthly increments over 30 years. That's all it means, right? And the typical mortgage on a residential home is 30 years, right?
And when would you typically amortize it longer?
So, for example, a lot of times when sellers are asking for close to retail price for a turnkey beautiful home, and they also want interest, which we typically don't do, but if they do want interest, it has to be very low. Sometimes that interest will make the payment a little too high, right? And in order for it to make sense on a monthly basis where you can actually make money and have a deal, you need to spread the payments out longer. When interest comes into play, that is when you need to talk about getting out an amortization calculator, which we give to our students and they use all the time, right? But that amortization schedule is going to tell you what your principal and interest payments will be. And then obviously you take your taxes and insurance, add it all together. But sometimes on a 30-year mortgage, even with a very low interest rate, it just doesn't make sense. Where with a bank, what you get is what you get at 30 years. But with seller financing, I could talk with the seller and say, hey, I know that you need the 2% interest, whatever it may be. But in order for me to give that to you, I definitely need to spread the payments out longer than 30 years. I'm going to need to be closer to 40 to 45, right? That doesn't mean that the seller won't get their money or will only get their money over the course of 45 years. It just I need to spread those payments out longer to make them lower.
Thank you. That was a great description. And I think a lot of people get caught up in that, where it's like, okay, now you're not going to pay me off until 45 years. No, it doesn't work like that. So thumbs up on that one.
Yep. So always remember that you guys both have to agree on the monthly payment, and it needs to make sense for both of you. If you are too far off with the seller and you are too far apart, it's okay to just say, hey, John, I think we're just too far apart. And like I mentioned on the beginning of the call, it's no hard feelings. I wish you the best. Just be honest. The worst thing you want to do is waste the seller's time and your time by locking up a deal that doesn't work just so you can say you got a signature.
And can you remind everyone on how exactly you do get payments at 0% interest?
You literally just ask the seller, what is the least you'd take on a monthly basis if we were responsible for the taxes, insurance, and everything else? That's the line right there.
There you have it, Mike's secret weapon.
Now, the key component to all of this is a calculator that me and Jay made. It's for creative financing deals, subject to, wrap, sub 2. If you'd like this calculator, you can get it real cheap on our website. It's romanscreativeacademy.com. Go to the shop, and you'll be able to download it and purchase it right there. It's super helpful, and this is what we use and all of our students use for all of our creative deals.
I'll also link it in the description of this video, but just a little tidbit into the calculator. It also puts into account if the house needs work, which is awesome,
Yep.
right?
So that's just a little bonus.
Yep. So if you guys liked this video, please like, comment any thoughts, questions that you have that came up, and make sure to subscribe to this channel so you get alerted when a new video comes out.
Guys, our goal is to hit 500 subscribers by the end of this year. Please help us make that happen.
Thanks, guys. See ya.